This is my buddy Sean Johnson. I'm Bruce Grady, and we've been talking about we heard a lecture by Thomas Lindsay the other night on the rights of nature, and which basically it's a group whose goal is basically to give nature the rights that have never been afforded it in human experience. For instance, the United States Constitution. In the whole Constitution, there's not one mention of the word of nature or the environment. What was that?
She just kicked the camera.
Don't kick the camera.
Yeah, one of the statements that he brought up that I think pretty well summed up how a lot of this works is that when you look at land as just a property has no rights. And the example that he used was of a slave. You know, back when slavery was illegal. If you were a slave owner and I came to your farm or whatever, and I either accidentally or willfully killed one of your slaves, it wasn't murder. It was, you know, restitution to your property. And it's the same kind of situation now with how we treat the planet. It's like if you dump toxic waste on the planet or kill a bunch of, you know, wildlife in an ocean from an oil spill or something, it's not, you know, obviously it's not murder because you're not killing people, but it's just you pay a fine and you go on.
You pay a fine to the government.
Yeah, you pay a fine to the government and you move on.
Yeah.
And
then he also used the example that women were considered property, and so until what, the 1910 or something like that, and so
late 1800s.
Okay, yeah. And if you if a woman was raped, then the restitution was paid to the husband or the brother, because that was misuse of property. Mm-hmm. Right. And so what I wanted to talk about was kind of the ramifications of two necessary points of view, about which there needs to be a 1,000-year conversation.
When you're talking about 1,000 years, you mean discussion or a 1,000-year plan, or what do you mean?
No, I'm not talking about a 1,000-year plan. It's simply, this is so valuable, so necessary. These are such important points that I don't think their solution is in one generation. But to fast forward here, I wanted to talk about the general points of view about which we need to have this 1,000-year discussion. Okay. One of the viewpoints, there's like 4 camps or something. One of the viewpoints is, hey, we need to let people be completely free. Right? And we need to let businesses make money because that's what they're made to do.
Right. Otherwise,
they're not concerned naturally about the environment. They just need to make money, and because that's what people have their freedom centered around, and that's how people live. Okay. Now, the problem with that point of view is if you let business run the world, and we don't even have to say corporations and big corporations. We'll just say natural human greed. With 6 billion people on the earth cannot last. It's going to die.
And here's another term I'm going to throw in there, that's one that you've used before, and it's not always just greed either. Sometimes it's just you're acting out of what you feel is self-preservation or preservation of your family or your loved ones. It's like, so there's all, but both ways are still centered around a fear-based motivation. It's like, I'm afraid that if I don't go over here and pick all these acorns up off the ground, that you're going to get them.
Right.
And then I won't have any for my family.
That's a good way to look at it.
And it's not necessarily that I don't like you or anything like that. It's just I'm concerned about my family or my own livelihood, and this idea that there's not going to be enough to go around. And so when you have that attitude,
But when you have 6 billion people on the earth.
7.
And when you have corporations whose basic structure is their mandate is the immediate quarter of the year, right? And they must make money, and it's not about the environment by definition. And what happens is that in any choice, like in having a development or not development, the environment loses every time. Unless there's specific regulations against it, there's no reason not to chop down a forest.
Right.
So in other words, what we have just verbally established is if businesses and people run willy-nilly, the environment simply will not last.
Right.
It's going to die.
If we have complete freedom to do what people will do, then yeah, things are going to get exploited, and eventually there won't be anything for anybody.
Exactly. Now let's go to the complete opposite point of view. Let's say that we say, okay, nature, whether it's Agenda 21 or Thomas Lindsay's group or whatever, nature needs to have its own rights to protect itself.
And then another thing that gets thrown, kind of lumped into this same category too, and you'll hear, arguments against. It's not always even nature, but say like here in Iowa, you can find places where there was an ancient development of Indians, and so there's been development halted because they found a burial site, or they found what could be like an archaeological site or something like that. And it's kind of the same idea. It's like there's a heritage here that belongs to more than just the people who are claiming the land. It belongs to everybody. And that's
what you're kind of talking about is the concept of the Commonwealth.
Right.
And this is something that's ignored by purely economic arguments or the corporate point of view, is that we all own and in a sense are inhabitants within a commonwealth of the air, of the sea, of the land.
Right.
And the air is a perfect example, because companies will basically, like here in Fairfield, there's one company that supposedly dumps something like 16 times the allotted amount of lead into the atmosphere every year.
Really?
And I think they do it mostly at night. And it's not only a threat to our babies and our intelligence of our babies and stuff like that, but it's a threat to the air as a whole. And yet, most of the time, you can't say that, like, you sample the air out here and you find some lead in it. You can't go to that company and say, oh, it's your fault.
Right.
Right. And so they can say, well, there's some lead in the atmosphere, but how can you prove that we did it? Right.
Exactly.
But the Commonwealth itself is very important. However, if you take that and the rights of nature to its extreme, right, then, as some people are afraid of with Agenda 21, you'll have people restricted to little enclaves in urban areas, cooped up in apartments with no capacity to go out and own land, much less develop land and take resources and do what they want, because that nature is sacrosanct, right? Moreover, these people, or the fear is that they have a fear that there'll be a one world government, right, which will itself, besides their enslavement to the concept of pristineness of nature, the world government will rule our lives and all freedoms will be destroyed. Okay? So what I'm saying is that you can view these opposing points of view, that there should be never any regulation of business, because we need to be free. Right? And that the environment is sacrosanct, and we are actually only a part of the environment, and we have no right to affect or ruin the environment, right? And what I'm saying is that these are two wildly divergent points of view that are the basis for the necessary. They must be reconciled in history, and they will be sooner or later. And what I say, this is a part of a 1,000-year conversation. It's not about 2013. It's nothing that neither group should point at the other and say, you are the devil. Right? These are...
Because both have valid points.
Exactly. And it's just like this. Individually speaking, right? We both have an individuality, like, I want to become rich, or I want to improve, I want to help my family, right? We have our own individuality, which is a small sphere, if not just us. And then the other part of our individuality is that we are literally a part of everybody else on the earth.
Correct. Yeah.
And a part of all the living systems. We cannot completely separate ourselves, and we cannot claim, as the Bible supposedly gave us authority to do, dominance over nature. We can no longer do that.
We're the stewards, not the
we're supposed to be the stewards.
Right.
Even in the Bible, we're supposed to. But there's one verse that says, we have domination. Well, yes, by fact of our logical intelligence
Right.
and opposed thumbs, we do.
Our intellect,
but not in terms of eternal right to poison our own nest unless we vote that, that's what we want to do, is kill ourselves.
Right. I mean, stating that argument is like, stating the argument that, I have the ability to, to kill you or something right now. It's like, well, does that make it right just because you can do it? Or because you have that ability? Sure, we have the ability to dominate the planet if we want to. But do we have the right to do that?
Do we respect our grandchildren and their grandchildren? And typically, no.
No, not by doing that. So
right.
It seems like there's got to be a middle ground between the two viewpoints.
And that will work out. And I guess what I'm saying is that neither side should be terribly paranoid, but should argue their position as hard as they can. And what Thomas Lindsay was saying the other day is basically, I'm ready and I'm willing to do battle. And he's taking a position which seems crazy to some, but it's the ultimate statement of that part of the conversation, that nature has rights and we must protect it. The other thing he was talking about was the concept of communities being able to make their own decisions. Right? Is it correct that a hog confinement can park itself right on the outskirts, for instance, of a community right next to the schools?
Right.
Just because the guy said, this is not a part of the city limits and I'm a free agent. Or the corporation comes in and supports the farmer and stuff like that. And I did want to read some points. It's called the box analogy. And these are, how you say, the opposite statement. These are a statement of the forces that are impinging upon communities that prevent them and people in states from enacting their own freedoms, right? Their own freedoms as decision-making structures in the face of the impingements of either state governments or special interests, meaning corporations or special interests.
Right.
Okay. And these are, and here, this is part of an email. Dear Bruce, as we learned last year in Thomas Lindsay's Democracy School workshop, and then again in his presentation to students, there are 4 obstacles to having local government be representative of the health and welfare of the local people, rather than outside agencies and corporations, whether they be Monsanto, Alliant Energy, or Waste Management. 2 of these 4 are federal. Number 1, the wrong use of the 14th Amendment to assign personhood to corporations is one. The second is the vastly disproportionate use of the Interstate Commerce Clause, meaning that corporations can shut down the ability of citizens to decide on the use of their air or water or whatever, because they say, no, you're limiting interstate commerce, and that's against the Constitution, and therefore you can't do that. See?
Okay.
And that's how they've turned down one community after the other from self-determination of certain environmental rules.
So part of it is we've got a constitution that has some rules that are they're conflicting, really, because you have, or actually go back to the Bill of Rights, you have people who have the right to
pursuit of happiness
and those types of things, and yet at the same time, other people.
Since corporations become looked on with extension of the Constitution over the last 150 years as people, then they are arguing, no, you can't stop us from doing this because we are people and we are free, Yeah. And the other 2 things, so those are at the federal level. One was the wrong use or wrong interpretation of the 14th Amendment to just give personhood to corporations. And the other is the Interstate Commerce Clause, right? The 2 at the state level are, number 1, state preemption. The term used to describe the state's power to overturn and disallow any ordinance passed by municipalities or counties that they may wish to cancel or modify. And so that's one, right? The second is Dillon's Rule, which in an 1868 case found that, quote, and this is, wow, Municipal corporations owe their origin to and derive their powers and rights wholly from the state legislature. It breathes into them the breath of life, without which they cannot exist. As it creates, so it may destroy. If it may destroy, it may abridge and control. In other words, at any time, the state may choose to do so. It could dissolve our duly elected Fairfield city government, replace it with appointed officers of its own choosing, or any other arbitrary administration that they wish to install. Together, these four principles, act as the four walls of a cage, blocking local communities from the ability to express and fulfill their own interests as the community may decide to do. Really getting what we're talking about, the Thomas Lindsay point of view, means knowing in our bones that until these four are nullified, denied, and prohibited, first at the local level, then the state, and ultimately the federal level, the tyranny of the corporatocracy, which is the collusion of big government and big corporations, will continue to keep sustainability illegal.
Yes, I think that is a very true statement, very well summed up.
Right. And so what I want is to challenge anyone who's opposing, the Thomas Lindsay view of the rights of nature and the need for communities to be able to have an influence to decide whether they want certain kinds of development, irrespective of the Commerce Clause and the corporate personhood. Whether the citizens want to have their air polluted, their commonwealth raped and ruined.
Right.
Is there a right? And so why I'm making this small video is to challenge anyone who is afraid of concerned about Agenda 21 and big government completely hamstringing all of our rights and freedoms as humans, to say, look, this is the opposing part of the conversation that we need to have. Right? It's not just about complete freedom, but it's also about our community voices and the statement that business left unfettered will completely erase life on Earth.
And the way it is now is it's businesses and corporations that have the freedom to do these things, not the people.
Right.
Because
they have more money.
Who's passing the state and federal legislation?
Who's got the power to get stuff passed?
Right.
And whose lawyers write the laws that get rubber stamped by the legislature?
And I'm not saying that everything that even the lobbyists do is completely bad or horrible, but they definitely have the power to influence, like, for instance, in Jefferson County, that you have the no hog lot ordinance, and if that was...
There is one?
Yeah, in Jefferson County.
There's an ordinance that prevents hog lots in Jefferson County?
Yeah. The JFAN, they've blocked and prohibited some of them to come in, and it's only because they haven't fought it in court.
I think the reason they blocked it is not an ordinance. What it is they successfully flexed all their potential muscles, so that the corporations know that, hey, to go into Jefferson County, you're gonna literally create a big stink, and it's not worth it because there's a lot of other land in Iowa.
But my point is that we're already in a position where if a big enough corporation with enough money wanted to, they could fight that and have it overturned.
Exactly.
Because even though the Jefferson County has, spoken very clearly that they don't want this, we could be overruled.
Exactly. And what Thomas Lindsay's point was is that when the strategy of environmental groups up to now, with, let's say, CAFOs coming into a county, is that you challenge the permit. And you didn't cross this T, you didn't dot this I, and so then the judge says, yeah, so no CAFO, right? So the CAFOs, the corporation's lawyers go back and they change the permit application, and they say, thank you very much for saving us money. They implement it, and then the judge says, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. It's totally legal, and there's nothing you can do about it.
So yeah, I think what a lot of people don't understand is that even we don't actually have the freedom right now. It's other entities.
Yeah,
many of them corporate entities.
In a sense, it's non-living entities right, that have the power to screw us as people.
Hmm. So that's what has to change.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Sean Johnson. I'm Bruce Grady, bringing this to you. All right. See you
Thank
later.
you.